Hello, everyone. Thanks for having me today. So today, I'm going to share with you some of the work we've been doing around reducing supply chain risks with blockchain and IoT. So supply chains have been around for a very long time. And as the global trade grew since the 70s and 80s, supply chains have been evolving. And at different points in time, different strategies were harnessed or implemented to solve for various kind of challenges. With the evolution of blockchain and IoT, we have a unique opportunity to take it to the next level by orders of magnitude, and also help with the digital transformation efforts and the faster cycles across the globe that we've been seeing. So let's dive into some of that. All right. So if you look at the supply chains of today, and if you're to speak to the SVP or the EVP of supply chain in any manufacturing company or retail company, right? So these are the five factors that they consistently and constantly look to optimize for, right? How do they keep the costs manageable? How do they address different kinds of risks? The speed of delivery from the time of manufacture to the time the customer purchases the goods, and how do they innovate with new products, and how do they keep the whole end-to-end ecosystem agile, right? So, and if you look at supply chains, right, there are fundamentally three classes of problems out there. The first and foremost is fraud. If you look at the pharmaceutical industry, in the developing countries, 15% of the medicines are counterfeit. In developed countries, at least 1% of the pharmaceuticals are counterfeit. And the problem is even more severe if you're looking at what we call as cold chain products. The top 20 medicines are mostly cold chain medicines. That means they need to be refrigerated at all times. Your vaccines are mostly cold chain. So the problem is compounded because along the supply chain continuum, they use different third-party services for trucking, storage, and such. And there is a wide variety in terms of the technological sophistication and quality and consistency of maintenance. So therefore, about 25% of vaccines, by the time they reach their destination, they're in degraded state, right? So, and in food, it's also a similar problem for wine, milk, meats, and flours, all these temperature-sensitive products. And interestingly enough, fraud in food is also quite rampant. There is deliberate fraud, and then there is mistakes that happen, right? If you consumed extra virgin organic olive oil between 2012 and 2016, very likely you consumed a mislabeled or marginally fraudulent or counterfeit organic olive oil. So there are tons and tons of studies and reports around these, so we can go on and on, but you get the message. And if you look at luxury goods and spare parts, again, counterfeit is there's a lot of problem with fraud. And then while companies and supply chains try to address all this, as customers, we want more transparency, we want things faster, easier to use, et cetera, et cetera. So the next class of problems is around operations and logistics. Across the global supply chains, if you look at the number of nodes and things that could go wrong, it's quite impressive that we have so many little incidents, and that's because of the years of technological innovations and all the things the ecosystem has put in to make sure that incidents don't happen. And still, World Economic Forum says that 10,000 containers get lost in the sea, right? And there are inefficiencies and manual processes that cause a lot of entropy in the system. The third class of challenges is around recall. And all of us have experienced recalls in one way or the other from automobiles or things that we buy. And the simple question of where did this particular item or product come from is surprisingly complicated because they're sourced from multiple different suppliers, made in different manufacturing plants, shipped via multiple distributors and retailers, etc. For example, when the mad cow disease broke out, there was an outcry from the consumers because they found out that the meat packet that we buy in the retail stores the meat didn't come from one cow. It might have had from 6 or 7 different cows. And also in other meat-related recalls, the meat might not be that of beef to begin with. Horse meat was mixed with the beef and so on, right? So all these issues happen, and when a recall needs to be handled, then it's a very complicated and cumbersome process. And today we're going to talk about how are we going to solve for some of these 3 big classes of problems, right? And in light of this, right, what we keep relentlessly seeing is supply chains are constantly infused with newer and newer technologies. Today, even in warehouses, they're fairly sophisticated with robots and augmented reality-based stock picking and so on. And today we'll focus more on blockchain and IoT. All right. So I just want to touch base quickly on IoT. I'm fairly positive that most of the audience are familiar with what IoT is and how it's used and such. But there are a few nuances that I'd like to draw upon. Well, we try to use this broad brushstrokes of something called IoT. Under the covers, it's very different strategies and technology implementations, right? A similar analogy is, when you say something is a vehicle, it could be a rocket ship or a bicycle or a train, but the implementation of them is fundamentally different, right? In a similar way, if you're tracking fleets versus tracking still assets like HVACs and or a MRI machine, the mechanics of doing that, the underlying technical architecture, the business functionality of that kind of track and trace is fundamentally different. Right? So we have different classes. These are just some of the top ones that we usually see, but there are many more. And in supply chain, we tend to see a combination of these usually. As you try to make supply chains more and more watertight, you want to have more information which you can, in a sense, actuate upon. Then you tend to use a combination of these IoT strategies. And these days, we're also seeing an infusion of visualization techniques like augmented reality used along with IoT. And when you point your iPad at a machine, the IoT data is overlaid on the augmented reality image, and then you can issue voice commands and or use a chatbot to interact with the machine, issue remote procedures on the machine, and so on. So it's far more interactive, very useful for the machine operators. And as you have predictive maintenance kind of issues as well, you can solve for those much more efficiently than with other mechanisms that we have used in the past. All right. So then let's move quickly to blockchain. Probably I'll skip this because most of you are familiar with blockchain. But specifically in the enterprise space, though, the nature and purpose of why blockchains are used is a bit different from the way Bitcoin and Ethereum and other permissionless blockchains are used. In the customers that we speak to very regularly, they're most interested in permissioned blockchains, private blockchains, where somebody like a large retailer might say, hey, all my suppliers, you are required to be on this blockchain so that we can do trading far more easily. All right. And from a company like Oracle that focuses predominantly on B2B market, right? So there are some special enterprise considerations that we need to take into factor. And many of our products are, come with those built-in features. And at Oracle, we use the Hyperledger as the blockchain as a blockchain framework that we use. And around that, we also built several value-added features. The ones that you see in the blue is what comes from the Hyperledger Fabric, and the ones that in the red boxes is what Oracle is building, and we have plans to go above and beyond as we scale up. And one of the most common questions I get from our customers is, what about mining? Blockchain is inefficient. It can't handle the kind of transactions that we are looking for, right? Yes, some blockchains need mining because of their permissionless nature, but Hyperledger Fabric and permission blockchains can be run without the need for mining, and therefore, first of all, none of our customers use mining, because they run the node themselves, and they already have other IT infrastructure that they're running. So this is one more that they're running along with the rest of their IT architecture. And they have an innate business interest to run the blockchain node because it simplifies their operations, gives them a better transparency and traceability, and so on. All right. So, and most vendors like Oracle and others that operate around Hyperledger Fabric, we have our own value-added features on top of what Hyperledger Fabric offers. And at Oracle, given that we have a lot of enterprise systems like supply chain management systems, enterprise resource planning systems, and so on, we naturally try to pre-integrate with all those as much as possible. All right, coming back to the supply chain discussion. So as we talked about, there are different classes of problems that we're trying to solve for, but all of them can be framed under a common set of technology solutions using a combination of IoT and blockchain. And it's first and foremost, we're trying to solve for traceability across the supply chain continuum. And as we do that, we also get into the transparency aspects of it. And today, if you look at the demands of the customers, and they want more and more transparency. They want to know that, okay, the cotton for their baby's clothes is actually the right kind of certified Egyptian cotton, or the beef that they're eating comes from the certified organic one, and that they're able to ascertain that in a credible way beyond what's printed on the package, right? And today, we are looking at solutions where, for example, if I pick up a salsa bottle in the grocery store, I can point my phone at a QR code, and it'll give me very rich labeling information about, okay, where was it processed, what kind of farms it came from, does it have allergens, and some of them offer chatbots that you can also interact with, and so on. So this kind of transparency was unprecedented before, and because of blockchain and IoT, you can bring these kind of solutions to customers. All right, so I call IoT and blockchain as the wine and cheese combination. Both are very nice independently, and they don't need each other, but when used together, they bring in some very compelling solutions. So when we look at the spectrum of supply chain solutions out there in the market, there is actually quite a few use cases that we can solve for. First and foremost is in the track and trace, along the supply chain continuum, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. The second one, I'll go out of order from what you see in the slide here a little bit. We're already looking at things like self-driving trucks and other kinds of automation coming into the picture, and even self-driven ships and so on. So when you have this kind of a situation, you can actually automate some of the underlying paperwork and remove some of the manual processes and the inefficiencies that come as a result of the manual paperwork, right? That's number one. Number two, even if you have a human-driven truck, for example, automating something like the bill of lading, which is a regulatory document that you're supposed to carry around in the truck when moving goods. There is a lot of fraud that happens and forgery that happens, especially with smuggling kind of activities and counterfeit activities. So by automating them, you can minimize some of those issues. And automating the bill of lading also helps you automate some of the payments-related use cases. For example, what we are hearing from some of the customers is that today there are net 60 and net 45 kind of arrangements where somebody delivers the goods to me, and I take my own sweet time of 45 days or 60 days or whatever my contract allows me to pay them. So far, that has worked in the interest of some companies, and the ecosystem has settled into a certain pattern. But technology and the customer demands and the pace of the business cycles are beginning to shake that kind of an arrangement, because it puts a lot of undue pressure on the smaller players, and they run into cash flow situations and so on. So trade finance is also a very important area where blockchain is making a dent and bringing good value across the ecosystem. And I'll move quickly, and there are a few other solutions as well. And I'd like to leave some time for Q&A in the end. All right, we're talking about product traceability, right? The fundamental challenge is that the raw materials or the components are sourced from multiple different vendors across different geographic regions, and they're assembled and manufactured in multiple plants. So this is a very, very simplistic image just to illustrate the concept. And then they use several third-party logistics providers, or sometimes they may have their own fleets to transport. And then eventually it reaches the end customer. Now, where IoT helps is now you can track where it's coming from. And even in the manufacturing process, let's say if a certain batch has failed or if a certain machine is operating out of tolerances, you can catch those using IoT. And all these special incidents, events that you want to track, you can persist to the blockchain. And now you can have different stakeholders part of this blockchain, or sometimes it may be a series of blockchains too, and that's fine. And now all of us have the same version of truth, okay, that this machine or this component got manufactured in this assembly line in this factory, and machine number 52 was having a high scrap situation, and because of that, maybe the shear strain of this rod is not what it's supposed to be, right? And that may cause problems when it's put in aircrafts and cars and so on. So now you can actually very clearly track and trace these things, and you can preempt problems. And as you begin to capture this end-to-end information, over time, we collect data, and you can actually now begin to optimize across the system of systems. Right? And you can learn algorithms to predict the cause and effect of various things on the overall quality outcome of the product. And in food industry, once again, there's a lot of activity already happening, pilots that are happening with respect to using blockchains and IoT, because this is a very near and dear problem for everyone. We have seen many recalls in the past from restaurant chains and processed food manufacturers and so on. So once again, with IoT, you're tracking the object as it moves along its supply chain continuum. And with blockchain, you're tracking these incidents and providing the information in real time to now the insurance company, the manufacturer, the distributor, the food processor. All of us have the same incident that, okay, this truck went out of the temperature limits. That means this entire shipment of shrimp may need to be reevaluated and tested before it's sent to the restaurants, right? So I know I went through quickly. I had a lot of content to cover, so I'll pause now and take questions. All right. Yeah. I mean, like all large companies, right? You start with one product and then evolve. Microsoft, started with DOS, and then it's a different company today. Oracle started with databases, and then uh, it went into ERP, supply chain, HCM, and then many different industry vertical specific products. So even though it's known as a database company, it's far, far beyond a database company. And blockchain is one of those technologies that makes sense to what our customers are doing in manufacturing, in supply chain, in retail. There are a lot of verticals where blockchain is a good fit. And for the purpose of just if you take the simple example of that immutable distributed ledger and everybody having the same version of truth, that itself has compelling value in terms of business operations and the automations that you can derive out of that, right? And as blockchains evolve and business models evolve, and now you overlay IoT, machine learning, and other technologies, now new and interesting opportunities open up as well, right? So it's about moving with technology and staying relevant and bringing the right kind of solutions that customers need. Yes.
and and the entire process. Too late.
Yeah, the question was, they're a manufacturing startup, and how can they leverage this kind of a solution, right? Yeah, I mean, you don't need to be a Fortune 500 company to get started. Actually, we are working with several startups and mid-sized companies already as part of our. So we are in a beta program right now. We'll be GA very soon with a blockchain product. So many of these companies are already part of our beta program. So reach out to me offline, and I'll plug you in with the right people, and we can get started. Yeah. All right. Yeah.
Hi. First of all, I apologize. I missed the first part of your presentation, but so you may have answered this. But how does this fit with your existing ERP systems, and especially with your certain unnamed competitor who actually has a lot of the manufacturing space for ERP? Is it kind of plug and play with that, or do you have an existing product that's plug and play with, I'll say, at SAP?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at Oracle's stance from the beginning, all of our products have been open. We are standards-based and open products. It's very common for our customers to take an Oracle product and integrate with our competitors' products, right? And we have open APIs, and that has been Oracle's stance for a very long time. It's nothing new as such. And it's same for blockchain as well. It'll be interoperable with others. And we are also in an age where there's co-opetition these days, right? At a Hyperledger Fabric level, SAP is part of the foundation, Oracle is part of the foundation, Intel and all these big companies are part of the foundation, and we are collaborating and producing and contributing to that. And of course, we compete in the open market in the for customers' business, and that's the nature of business these days, right? So yes, it's interoperable, and we can plug and play with any other product. Yeah. All right. Thank you very much.